Snoyink.
Snoyink.
Like snow and
Snoyink.
like yank
Right.
as an American, but with an I. Yink.
Thank you.
Snoyink.
Thank you. Thank you. You've got
That's
two
right.
submissions. One's the LTP, one's the climate change. If you want to run them together, I'm good with that.
Excellent.
Yep.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa, everybody. My name is Nicky Snoyink, and I'm the Forest and Bird Regional Manager for Canterbury and the West Coast. So thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. As the Mayor has said, I'm going to speak on the climate change strategy and on the long-term plan. 5 minutes on each, or maybe 3 on one and 7 on the other. I'll first speak on the climate change strategy and then on the LTP, and there's a great amount of crossover of the two, as far as I can see. And regarding the LTP, the key points that I'll speak on will be freshwater, Indigenous biodiversity and biosecurity. So congratulations on the climate change strategy. It's really great to see some action, some progress. That's great, following the climate emergency that you guys declared in 2019. It's already a significant step forward and excellent overview of the many initiatives that appear to be underway already. So it looks like you're on the right track. Forest and Bird strongly encourages the use of nature-based solutions to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Things like increasing the size of naturally occurring wetlands, estuary areas, dunelands, and to protect communities as well as provide new habitat for Indigenous species that are threatened by sea level rise and flooding events. Protecting and remaining in situ areas of Indigenous biodiversity in the district needs to be a priority. Then planting new areas to increase carbon sequestration. Pest control is also a vital component to increase the resilience of Indigenous vegetation in the district. This all, of course, needs to be done in parallel to dramatically reducing our carbon emissions. Regarding water and climate change, we understand that the Council has been investigating the work of the Netherlands Room for the River architect Henk Ovink, whose work is really relevant to the city, and we strongly support that. The many awa springs, existing large wetlands adjacent to and surrounded by a significant open space in the middle of the city, the Avon-Otakaro River Corridor, provide a perfect canvas for retrofitting nature-based climate solutions to the city. Time-bound measures would strengthen the climate strategy significantly. Our ask to you is that you develop some clear targets and milestones to measure and monitor your progress across the different action programs that you have got going. This will be especially important to confirm that the climate strategy is on the right track and to help people know what they can do themselves as individuals out there. And also, so there's some accountability at election time. So on the long-term plan, Forest and Bird generally supports the long-term plan, and we strongly agree with your statement in the draft climate strategy that was mentioned by the previous submitter. Climate change is the biggest challenge of our time. It's already affecting the weather, health and well-being, natural environment, taonga species, mahinga kai, food production, biosecurity, infrastructure and the economy. And I too wonder why that wasn't sort of transferred straight over into the long-term plan. It would have been really good to see that crossover. That being said, though, it was great to see the Council's commitment in the long-term plan to casting a climate lens across everything that you do. It was good to see that in there. And in your strategic priorities, I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. We ask that strategic priority of meeting the challenge of climate change through every available means be elevated as an overarching priority so that it informs everything else that you do across your work. So when you are faced with important decisions that affect the future of the city, you can ask yourselves, how will this help achieve our climate change ambitions? After your declaration of a climate and ecological emergency in 2019, Forest and Bird would have expected to see a greater focus on freshwater improvements and native species protection in the long-term plan. On freshwater, polluted water and particularly nitrate pollution is a big issue for many Cantabrians. especially as they begin to discover that their drinking water is not drinkable. The Christchurch drinking water supply is particularly vulnerable to the effects of intensive land uses in the neighbouring districts, and today's freshwater issues are likely to be exacerbated by climate change and need urgent attention now. Some hard conversations are needed to be had to protect drinking water supplies and protect and restore ecological health of the region's freshwater ecosystems, and to implement the government's essential freshwater policy. Our ask to you is that you prioritise and fund and resource management planning processes to implement the freshwater policy as quickly as possible to safeguard the city's freshwater resources for generations to come. On biodiversity, Indigenous biodiversity, native species, Canterbury's Indigenous biodiversity continues to slide into the abyss. Protection and maintenance of Indigenous biodiversity in the Canterbury region occurs in a haphazard way, I'm sorry to say. Forest and Bird supports ECAN's Biodiversity Champions program to bring more consistency to biodiversity protection and maintenance in Canterbury. And we acknowledge that Councillor Pauline Cotter is the Council's representative on the ECAN's Biodiversity program as the champion. Happy to have a chat any time, Pauline. We commend the Council on its significant ecological sites program. However, we are concerned that the Council's processes do not protect these sites as they should. The NPSIB, the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, will soon be gazetted and reinforces the Council's role to identify, map and protect significant ecological sites or significant natural areas, SNAs. And this obligation has been around for a long time, since the RMA's inception, and the NPS reaffirms that obligation. We do understand that City Council is undergoing a plan change to strengthen Indigenous biodiversity vegetation clearance provisions and to better protect these areas, but currently this appears to be quite limited. Forest and Bird asks that you please adequately resource and fund the plan change to bring in the necessary experts and strengthen the provisions to protect SESs and maintain Indigenous biodiversity across the whole district. There's a real opportunity here to get a win for native species and for climate change in this space. Alongside the regulatory stuff, strong incentives are needed for land occupiers to voluntarily protect their significant ecological sites. We understand that the City Council has actually decreased its Community Biodiversity Fund to 190,000 and by my reckoning, this is less than 50 cents a year for every Christchurch resident. This provides little confidence of any commitment at all to addressing the ecological emergency that you declared a couple of years ago. As a starting point, our ask to you would be to double or even triple the Community Biodiversity Fund to assist land occupiers to protect their significant ecological sites. This will go a little bit further to ensuring your outcomes for the natural environment can be achieved. On biosecurity, the risks will increase as climate change kicks in. We're already seeing myrtle rust, threatened species like Pahutakawa, Manuka and Rata. Again, we support Forest and Bird supports ECAN's biosecurity advisory groups, and these groups are especially vital for having eyes and ears in the community for new biosecurity incursions. Forest and Bird would encourage the Christchurch City Council to have representation on the Banks Peninsula group if they haven't already, especially given the shared vision for pest-free Banks Peninsula and any biosecurity issues that will inevitably rise in the urban area. We ask that you seek a position, if you haven't already, and resource participation on the biosecurity advisory groups that Environment Canterbury runs. And one other biosecurity issue that I did raise with you last year, but I'm not sure it's been dealt with, and I've raised it with ECAN again as well, is the issue of exploding numbers of Canadian geese taking up residence in the Avon-Otakaro River corridor, progressively degrading the amenity and likely the ecological values in places along the Awa from the city centre to the estuary. I sincerely hope I don't have to come back next year and say the same thing. And on that note, I'm going to finish, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. Kia ora.
Aaron,
Yeah, you're not the only one to raise the geese issue, although during the LTP potentially. But with the geese, do you think we should host a wild foods fest every year where we only eat geese?
Well, I do believe they make really good salami, so if anyone wants a salami...
Yeah, the high fat content. Good point. Let's encourage it.
Yeah, encourage it.
I'm vegetarian, but I'm more than happy to support
too.
people eating geese.
Totally.
Very good.
Yeah.
But thank you very much. I don't think anyone around the table disagrees about the need to get on top of the control of them, but it is a very challenging.
What's good for you guys?
Issue. Can't run around with guns in central city.
No, you
locations.
can't. That's right. I do believe there was a plan in place to talk with the ECAN and the Christchurch airport, and I just wonder where that got to.
Yeah.
We haven't had any updates on that. So
We'll be following up on that as well. Thank you.
excellent. Kia ora.
Thank you. Right. So the next person is Michelle Clark.